Welcome, friends. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Inspired Yogi. Today we are with Dr. Judy Morgan. Dr. Judy Morgan is a veterinarian, a holistic veterinarian, author, podcaster, and I'm so looking forward to this because we love our furry friends. I know we love our dog so much, and we get so much great information from someone like yourself. And I want to share it, not only with my dog, this good information, but with the world. So, Judy, thank you for being on the show with me today. I appreciate your
Thank
time
you for
here.
having me. I'm very happy to be here. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a Labradoodle, and she's 7 years old. So we actually, when I very first started podcasting on, we had two brothers from Montreal that had left their jobs to create raw dog food for their community up there in Montreal. And it inspired us to get our dog on a raw food diet. And that kind of led to other research that my wife's been doing on dog health. But what are your thoughts on a raw food diet for dogs?
I have been a raw food feeding advocate for 25 years, which is a very popular stance in the veterinary field. Most veterinarians, actually, the AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association, and AHA, the American Animal Hospital Association, have statements on their website saying that veterinarians should be against raw feeding, that they should counsel their clients to not feed raw food to their dogs. And they say it's according to the CDC, which also has the same statements, saying that your family will die of contamination from bacteria and contamination when your dog licks you or you clean up the stool if they're eating raw food. What's really interesting about that is that FDA oversees pet food, and FDA has a zero tolerance policy for bacteria in raw pet food, which is really interesting because USDA allows highly contaminated meats to be sold in the grocery store.
Oh my gosh.
Chicken is highly contaminated. Poultry. I watched a documentary on that, and they were like, just consider when you bring raw poultry into your kitchen, it's like bringing in nuclear waste because it is so contaminated.
Wow.
And it's allowed by USDA because it is assumed that you will cook the meat before you eat it, and that's why like hamburger has statements on it, or ground meat has statements on it. This is cooked to an internal temperature of blah blah. But when you sell raw pet food, it's understood that you are going to feed it as raw. And so they have a zero tolerance policy. So if they go into a store and take a raw food out of a freezer or out of a refrigerator and test it and it has any bacteria in it at all, usually they're looking for E. coli, Listeria, and Salmonella. The one that we see the most common is Listeria. But if they find it, then it's a recall. And unfortunately, they don't always handle it very well. And, so some of it's a little questionable when they get those results back. A lot of the raw food companies are now going to using a kill step because they don't want to have those recalls. It's very expensive and it's also very bad for your reputation. So they
Mhm.
use something called high pressure pasteurization, which the bad news is it's basically pressure applied to the food and it bursts bacterial cells and it would kill them. But the food is already packaged in its like plastic packaging, and then they apply the pressure. So there's a lot of question um, by people of, okay, is that driving plastic particles or changing the food? We don't know. Most testing shows that the nutrient values remain the same after the HPP. Not all companies use that. Some people are using bacteriophages, which are basically things that help break down any bacteria that are there. There are some companies who are not using any kill step at all.
Mhm.
And, FDA is pretty vigilant. So you can usually be pretty assured that when you're buying raw food, it's going to be a very, very clean product, cleaner than what you're buying for yourself in the grocery store. So a lot of people who want to make their own raw food, they go to the grocery store and get the food and feed it raw. And it's like, well, you are feeding contaminated meat. But our pets have a very, very low pH in their stomachs. Their acid level is pretty high. So uh, not going to affect them 99% of the time. They're fine. I mean, if you take your dog out in the woods and they find something dead and rotten, they're going to eat it.
Yeah.
So, and it's not a problem for them. It would be a problem for us. Our stomach acid is not as strong as theirs is. Um, so 25 years of feeding raw, 25 years of having clients with my patients being fed raw, I never saw a problem. So I get a little upset with the whole veterinary stance of raw feeding will kill everybody in your family. No, it won't.
Yeah, that's a crazy stance. I mean, we literally
I,
buy pork raw at the grocery store, bring it home, cut it
Mhm.
up, and feed it to the dog, and she's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. They do great with it. It's not a problem for them. So I used to make all my own food. At one time, we had 13 dogs, and so twice a month, my husband and I would spend a couple of hours on a Sunday afternoon grinding up our different recipes,
Hmm.
uh, and making about 150 pounds of food, and then we just label it and put it in the freezer. For me, it was a labor of love, and to give up 4 hours a month to make food for my dogs, that was a less expensive way to do it than buying it pre-made. It's sort of like, if you buy TV dinners that are already pre-made, that's going to be more expensive than making your own food. Just
Sure.
like eating out at a restaurant is more expensive. So, for people who are saying, "Oh, that raw food is so much more expensive," well, you can join co-ops. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Um,
Well,
so,
what's
and
what's wrong with
if
the
you can
kibble
buy in
diet?
bulk, great. What's wrong with the kibble diet? So,
Yeah.
kibble it goes through an extrusion process. That's the process that the Kellogg's brothers developed for making cereal.
Mm.
And it's made for cooking and forming grains into whatever little shapes we want. So, in order to make that kibble and use the extrusion process, the ingredients are going to undergo high heat cooking, probably 4 to 5 times by the time it comes out as the finished product. And in order to make it stick together as a kibble going through the extruder, it has to have a starch to hold it together. So our cats are obligate carnivores, and our dogs are sort of facultative carnivores. They're more omnivorous than cats are, and they have zero requirement for carbohydrates in their diet. But when we make an extruded diet, we have to have a lot of starchy carbs to hold it together. So they use corn or wheat or soy or peas or potatoes or lentils. And so that's your starchy part. So when we're buying those extruded kibbles, the carbohydrate content in there is going to be probably 50 to 60%. The maximum amount of meat you can put through there is 30%. So you're not feeding a high meat food, particularly for cats. This is so bad. You're not feeding a high meat food to an obligate carnivore. You're also feeding a food that's about 6% moisture. And if you look at what our pets would eat in the wild, if they were lions and tigers, um, they would be eating something that's about 75 to 80% moisture. That's what an animal body is. And that's what they're meant to eat. Cats are desert animals. They don't drink very much. So when you feed them a dry kibble and then they're not drinking enough water, this is where we end up with all the urinary problems and urinary obstructions and kidney failure and all those issues, particularly with cats, more so with them than with dogs. But dogs aren't meant to eat a 6% moisture diet either. So, what I find when people come to me with an animal that's been eating dry kibble, they're drinking a lot of water. When we switch them over to a more species appropriate diet, which is a high moisture diet, suddenly they're not drinking anymore. Nobody's going to the water bowl. And then I get those panicked phone calls and emails. Oh my gosh, I can't get him to drink. What do I do? I'm like, he doesn't need to drink. It's in his food. That's what it's meant to be. And so there's a lot of problems with kibble. It's a myth that kibble keeps their teeth clean. That would be like your dentist saying to you, "Hey, go home and eat crackers all day. Don't ever brush your teeth. You'll be fine. It'll be all good." No, it's not all good. But our pets that eat raw food and don't have those carbohydrates, their dental health is much better. Now, that's also kind of driven by breeds. Small breeds of dogs are much more prone to dental disease, no matter what you feed them, than large breeds of dogs. Um, When we feed them a species appropriate diet, they're getting higher omega-3s. When we feed them the kibble based diet, they're getting a lot of omega-6s because of all the plant material that's in there. Omega-6s are inflammatory in our pets' bodies. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. So if you're feeding a kibble diet, you absolutely need to be supplementing omega-3s. So that's going to be fish oil, calamari, squid oil, something like that. You can buy it as a liquid, you can buy it as capsules, but it absolutely needs to be supplemented because they need that for brain health, joint health, heart health. And the omega-6 to 3 ratio is totally out of whack in kibble. So there's a lot of problems with feeding kibble. It's also because it's cooked at such high heat, it basically cooks a lot of the nutrients out of it. So we have to add back in a synthetic vitamin mineral mix. So that's when you read the label, you might recognize the first 4 or 5 things, and then all of a sudden it looks like chemical soup. The chemical soup is all the vitamins and minerals we had to put back in because they don't exist anymore. And we have certain levels that we need to meet in order to call it a complete and balanced diet.
I'm glad that you mentioned supplements. I noticed as I was scrolling through some of the podcast episodes that you've had recently, someone was talking about supplements for dogs and do they need them? If they're on a raw food diet, do they need supplements and which ones?
It really depends on where your raw food is sourced from. So, if you are getting food that is using free range, grass fed, healthy, happy animals
Mhm.
to make the meat versus confinement raised. So, for instance, confinement raised poultry, that poultry is going to be very low in omega-3s. Confinement raised beef, very low in omega-3s. But when we have free range grass fed, those meats are much higher in the omegas, in the omega-3s. So when we look at a lot of the raw food companies, a lot of them are sourcing very high quality meats. And so you probably don't need to supplement unless your pet is prone to certain issues. So my breed of choice is Cavalier King Charles Spaniels and English Toy Spaniels. They are very prone to heart disease. It's a genetic problem for them. They're also prone to a couple of different neurologic diseases and malformations in their brain, spinal cord. So I have always supplemented omega-3s for my dogs because they've got issues where omega-3s are going to be very helpful. So even though they're fed a diet that has a very low omega-6 to 3 ratio, you want it less than 5 to 1. Most kibble is 30 to 1. Um, Even though my dogs are on, high quality diets, I'm still supplementing just because I know that they are prone to these problems. And I'm like, if I can support that heart a little better, a little longer, why wouldn't I? So I'm kind of across the board. I'd love to see omega-3 supplements added for our pets. With that said, when you're buying any kind of oils, these are going to usually be marine oils. So it could be phytoplankton, squid, calamari, salmon, whitefish, whatever. Um, we don't want them to be rancid. If the oil's rancid, that's worse than giving them none at all. So you want to buy your oils either in metal or dark glass bottles, never in plastic. You want to store them in a cool area, so maybe even in the refrigerator. And you want to buy a bottle that you're going to use up in maybe a month to 6 weeks. You don't want it sitting on your shelf month after month after month. Most of the good quality ones have sort of a locking system. So if it's a pump, when you pump it, the oil comes out and then it locks so no air can get back into that bottle because air, heat, and light are what are going to make it become rancid. Those oils shouldn't have any smell. If they have a smell to them, it's gone bad. Go get a new one.
Like a fishy smell or what kind of
Yeah.
smell?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It'll get a really pungent, fishy, icky smell when they go bad.
Do older dogs need collagen?
Collagen has really started getting a lot of play in the past 5 years or so. You're certainly not going to hurt them with it. Um, Collagen, I mean, we know it's great for skin health. We know it's great for joint health. Glucosamine, chondroitin, a lot of different things we can use to help support them. And certainly the bigger dogs are more prone to arthritic problems. And any dog who's on a highly inflammatory diet is going to be more prone to arthritic problems. Interestingly, we do a lot of rescue, and one of our dog, well, actually, we have one now too, but we adopted an 8-year-old Cavalier. He was a breeding male from a puppy mill. And when I took his x-rays, he had the worst arthritis, his spine, his back legs, I mean, just awful. And it's because he'd been used for too much breeding, fed a really poor quality diet, lived in a little 2x2 cage. And we put him on a raw diet, got, kind of all of his issues cleared up. And he lived to 19.
Wow.
And he didn't really develop mobility problems with all of that arthritis until he was about 15. So just getting him on an anti-inflammatory diet allowed him to have a really high quality of life with good mobility. Eventually, he ended up in a 4-wheel cart because he just wasn't strong enough. He lived to 19. He just wasn't strong enough to get around on his own. But with his little cart, he could chase the girls all over the house. And he thought it was great. And
Now,
we have an
you,
older Cocker Spaniel right now, and he hurt his left hind leg running through the door at the same time as another dog, and he hit the wall. So I took him in to have him x-rayed to make sure he didn't do anything really bad. When they took the x-rays, we found that his right hip was extremely arthritic. And I went, oh my gosh, that looks really bad. And so, we kept him quiet for a little bit till the other leg healed. And we think he's a teenager. We don't really know. He chases the ball, races around the yard. You would never, like, if I didn't have that x-ray showing what his hip looked like, I would never know it because he's on a very anti-inflammatory diet. He's on omega-3 supplements. He's on other joint supplements, and he doesn't show any issues at all. So the great thing about using a good diet and using good supplements, you can take a dog who looks terrible on x-rays and still have them have incredible mobility.
now, when you say an anti-inflammatory diet for a dog, what does that look like?
So it's not going to have the grains, and it's not going to have the starches. So it's not going to have all those omega-6s. If we're using grass-fed, free-range meats, that's going to be much higher in the omega-3s. And so we don't want we don't want the highly processed foods because that's going to contribute to the inflammation when we have them on these fresh food diets. And then we add in a lot of things like sardines and fresh fish. We own a farm, so our dogs get a lot of eggs, organic eggs from our chickens. So that's another really good source of omegas and fat-soluble vitamins. We process our own meat chickens, and we also have dairy cows and have fresh raw milk, which is really amazing. It is very easy to find. The goat milk industry, the pet food world has taken over the goat milk industry, and it's very easy to find raw goat milk or fermented goat milk for your pets, and it is just amazing powerhouse for our pets.
We use kefir. Is it better to go with the raw goat milk?
It depends. If you're buying kefir at the grocery store, that's been pasteurized and kind of processed a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, we always go for raw products. And like the state I live in, you are not allowed to sell raw dairy milk for
Hmm.
human consumption, but you can sell it for pet consumption. So
Yep.
I don't have to worry about it because I have my own cow. But otherwise, I would be able to go to the stores and buy raw goat milk or raw um, cow milk labeled for pets, but it
Mhm.
also is available in a lot of independent pet stores. You can order it online. It comes frozen from a lot of the good pet food companies. So that's a really, really good addition. And so, for instance, people who have pets that we did this quite often in practice, pets who have been long suffering with inflammatory bowel disease or allergic skin disease, just broken out, miserable, we'd put them on a raw milk diet for 30 days. All they got was raw milk. And 95% of the time, everything clears up and you reset everything and everything looks great. A lot of the chronic inflammatory problems, arthritis, allergies, IBD, they're directly related to, chronic ear infections. It's directly related to ultra processed food. And when we get that out of their diet and reset them, they switch unbelievably. In doing our rescue, we have brought in so many animals with infected ears, infected eyes, infected skin, infected feet, bladder infections, just, kind of a train wreck.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we don't have to go with a lot of drugs. We just get them cleaned up really with their diet. And now we're doing a lot with microbiome treatments and doing a lot of fecal microbiota transplants for these animals that have had chronic problems. And 80% of your immune system is in your gut. So if we don't fix that, we aren't going to fix these chronic problems. So when we get them on a species appropriate diet, what they are meant to eat, which is going to be basically a meat-based diet. For our dogs, we use about 15% vegetable matter in there, but it's going to be non-starchy things like dark leafy greens. And for our cats, we only need 2 to 4% of that vegetable matter in the diet because they need some fiber. So that is what our animals are meant to be eating. And when we put them on that, I've even had dogs that have come in with these horrible infections. And so we tend to say that, okay, one of the most common food intolerances that we see is one, grains, and two, chicken, because chicken is it's a cheap protein source, so it's used a lot in pet food. And so we'll take them off of that. And usually I'll use, if I have an animal with a lot of problems, I'll look at a whitefish diet or a rabbit diet. We actually now have alligator, which is hypoallergenic because it's a novel protein. They've never been exposed to it before. My sister's dog right now has got some inflammatory bowel disease because he's had a bunch of other things going on. And she said, I need a novel protein diet. And of course, the traditional veterinarians want to put these animals on hydrolyzed proteins. Those hydrolyzed proteins are hydrolyzed soy, hydrolyzed corn, or hydrolyzed chicken feathers. Not what our pets are meant to be eating, not good for long-term health. So I said to her, well, just get the alligator diet. It's got minimal ingredients, but it's complete and balanced. He's certainly never been exposed to that before. And let's give this a try for 30 days rather than jumping into doing a whole bunch of bowel biopsies. And I said, and do the fecal microbiota transplant. Because he's been on antibiotics off and on. Every time they take antibiotics, we destroy their gut. We destroy their skin microbiome, their ear microbiome, their gut microbiome. And, if your animal has chronic allergies, I guarantee they're on chronic antibiotics because they scratch themselves till they get infected or their ears are always gooey. And we just keep destroying all the different levels of microbiome in the body, and we need to replace that.
Hmm. Fascinating. There's a couple of questions I have, but I really want to get into vaccines. When
Okay.
we started feeding my dog raw food, my wife kind of looked more into dog health and what should and shouldn't do, and she found that dogs don't need all these vaccines that they're getting. They don't need all these repeat vaccines. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they definitely don't need all the repeat vaccines. It's been, how when you go to the dentist, they give you your card for your next appointment in 6 months or 12 months.
Yep.
Veterinarians have tried to do that and it never works. But we do send out reminder cards every year saying Fluffy is due for his shots. The card doesn't say Fluffy is due for a complete exam and lab work to see what's going on inside his body. It really should say that. But the
Just come
veterinarians
in
are
for a
afraid.
shot. It's fine.
Yeah, right. But they say come in for a shot because if you think, oh my gosh, he's overdoing his rabies vaccine, I'll get in there. And if you say he's due for a physical exam, you look at your dog and go, looks good to me. What do I need their opinion for? But just remember that your veterinarian knows things that you don't. Like they can listen to the heart. They can look deep in the ear canals. They can look at the back of the eyes and see what the retinas are doing. They can palpate the abdomen and say, well, his spleen is kind of enlarged or his liver feels lumpy. But then they can also do lab work that looks at kidney function, liver function, and really see what's going on inside the body. That's what we should be looking at, not he's due for shots. But that was just always the sales pitch. And that's what we were told in vet school. Nope, you get them in every year. You send out those reminder cards and they'll come in for those shots every year. But somewhere in the 1990s, we started looking at things and going, hey, these core vaccines, distemper, hepatitis, parvovirus, rabies, they last a lot longer than a year. Why are we giving them every year? Every time we poke one of these vaccines into the animals, we're stimulating the immune system. And
And when you say
now,
more than a year, how long are you talking?
so we don't really know. Nobody's done a ton of testing, but AVMA and AHA now say on their websites that the core vaccines, the ones I just listed, should be
Hmm.
given no more often than every 3 to 5 years. Well, there's no science behind that. That's just sort of we know we don't need them every year. And so, when you talk to your veterinarian, do they say you need them every year? Do they say you need them every 3? Do they say you need them every 5? And none of it is based on any science. So it's much better to go in, and if they say we think Fluffy it's been 3 years, we think Fluffy is due for distemper parvo vaccine. Uh, the correct answer from the client would be, well, let's do a titer. Let's do a blood test and see whether he still has antibodies showing he's protected. If he's got antibodies, it's all good. I don't need to give them another vaccine. And the problem with giving these vaccines more often than necessary is that we are seeing so much autoimmune disease, so much more than when I was first in practice. We saw very little autoimmune disease. Now we see autoimmune hemolytic anemia, autoimmune thrombocytopenia, which is killing off the platelets and then they bleed to death. Uh, uh, Meningitis of unknown origin. So an inflamed spinal cord and brain. And it's like, what are we doing? Well, first of all, we're using a lot of chemicals on them that we shouldn't use, but we're also over vaccinating them. And that immune system is just going, I don't even know what to do with this. We also have, carcinogenic preservatives in their food. So many things that we are doing wrong. All the dyes that are put in pet food, the same dyes that are now being banned in people food. It's like, well, and our pets can't even see all those colors. They don't really need blue, green, red, and yellow pieces in their bowl. They really don't care. They care what it smells like and what it tastes like, which is they spray it with palatants to make it taste good and make it addictive. It's awesome.
I feel like we could be having this conversation about the American diet too. It's like
Oh yeah, it's
so
it's
parallel.
exactly this. It's exactly the same,
Yeah.
and which I've been on a lot of human podcasts lately because I'm like, listen, you guys are like talking to the people who understand what we should be putting into our bodies. And those are the same people that have animals and really care about what they're putting in their bodies, but they don't understand the parallels between ultra processed pet food, ultra processed human food. So we want to move toward the minimally processed. Now, there are a lot of vaccines, going back to that only last a year. So leptospirosis, it's not a very good vaccine. It's a highly reactive vaccine, and it only lasts 8 to 12 months. It also only covers 4 out of the 7 types of lepto that our dogs can get. So, and for a long time, it was only 2. They came out with 4 a few years ago. But lepto is actually not that common. But weirdly, AVMA decided to make it a core vaccine about 2 years ago. And I hated that vaccine in practice. It's highly reactive. I wouldn't use it on small dogs because small dogs like to have vaccine reactions and they like to drop dead, and it's really no fun. And you also want to split up the vaccines and not give them all in one lump visit. That's just not a good way to do it. But if you take your dogs to community groups, boarding, grooming, daycare, you may be required to give a whole slew of vaccines. They may say, oh, he's got to have, and a lot of these facilities are the ones who are demanding vaccines every year. Like they haven't even caught up with the every 3 to 5 on the core vaccines. And so I quit taking my dogs to the groomer. I have spaniels. They need grooming. I learned how to do it myself because I got really tired of can we see his vaccine paper with the 27 vaccines? I'm like, no, you can't. So I just gave up and I said, I'll just do this at home. And so that's a problem. And like when I travel, I have someone come to my house and stay with my pets. I don't take them to boarding facilities.
Mhm.
My dogs are not uber friendly with strange dogs, so they're not going to go to a dog park. And so even the dog parks, some of them are, very adamant about showing your vaccine records. Others are like, yeah, who cares? So, I mean, you just never know. But me personally, there's a laundry list of vaccines we could give, and I wouldn't give most of them to my own pets. But you have to look at the exposure that your pet has. Do you have a cat that's a farm cat outside? Do you have a cat that's a house cat and never sees the light of day? Do you have a miniature poodle that uses pee pads inside your apartment? Or do you have a hunting dog or farm dog who's out in the fields all the time? Do you have a dog who goes to boarding, grooming, daycare? Do you go to a lot of the fundraisers for shelter dogs and your dog is around shelter dogs? So you have to really individualize what you do with your pet based on what their exposure level is. And so if you go into a veterinary office and they hand you a piece of paper, it says, this is our vaccine schedule that we do for all dogs. Not good. That's when you have to have that conversation of, yeah, but my dog doesn't do this or does do that. And so in my books, I talk a lot about what the different vaccines are, how long they last, how the diseases are spread, what the exposure level would be, what the symptoms are, and how dangerous is it. Like kennel cough, not dangerous. They get a cough and a sneeze. It's like a kid with a cold. We don't vaccinate our kids for colds.
Oh,
So, yeah, so it's silly. The influenza vaccine, there's two different types of influenza now that they combine in there. Influenza is actually pretty rare. We get occasional outbreaks. So it'll be one kennel or one vet office. We had a huge outbreak, maybe 8 years ago at a dog show where the judges at the dog shows are supposed to have the owners lift the lips for the judge to look at the bite and the teeth. And this judge did all of that herself. So she went dog to dog to dog, sticking her hands in the mouth of every single dog. One of the dogs was carrying influenza. Everybody got sick. And then, of course, those dogs left that show, went out to other shows over the next 6 weeks, and lots of dogs got exposed. So every once in a while we have a weird outbreak, but in general, it's not very common. So I didn't even carry that vaccine in my clinic.
There's a lot of talk this year about ticks and how many more there are and all this conspiracy theory around ticks. But what do you think about the Lyme disease vaccine for dogs?
Terrible. It's
Terrible?
about 60% effective. And it's more effective if it's given before your dog has ever been exposed. So the vaccine, I think, can be started. It takes a series of 2, and I think it can be started at 10 weeks of age. So, if you're really worried about it, you probably need to start it early and give it before your pet is ever exposed. It'll be a little bit more effective, but it's not a very effective vaccine. We saw lots of dogs that, came down with Lyme disease, even though they were vaccinated. The other problem is, okay, we can vaccinate for Lyme disease, but there's a dozen tick-borne diseases. We don't have vaccines for the others. And even if we did, I wouldn't give 12 vaccines for tick-borne diseases. So the real problem is, how do we keep the ticks off our dogs?
Okay.
But then we get into huge problems there because the veterinary world is just thrilled, and the pharmaceutical world, with giving neurotoxins to our pets to prevent flea and tick infestations. So we have topicals, we have orals, we have injectables. They're all dangerous, and I would never use any of them on my animals because the side effects are horrible. They're neurotoxins. That means
What do
they're
you
toxic
recommend for
to the
ticks and
brain.
fleas then?
So we have a lot of different ways we prevent them, and I've actually got really good blogs on this. And one of my books is Protecting Your Pet Against Parasites, and we talk about this a lot. But we use multi-layer, particularly if so my sister lives in Massachusetts, high Lyme area. Everybody up there has Lyme. All the animals have Lyme. Her horse had Lyme multiple times. So we use multiple layers depending on where we live. I live in North Carolina. If I take my dogs in the woods, I'm going to come home with ticks. My dogs don't go in the woods because I don't want to come home with ticks. But a lot of people hike and, like to go through fields and things. So we need something to protect them. So we can, in their food, we can feed herbs that make them taste really bad and make the fleas and ticks not want to attach on them, not want to bite them. So that could include fresh garlic. It could include, and yes, you read on the internet that garlic's toxic to dogs. It was a horrible study where it would have been the equivalent. It was a concentrated garlic extract that they fed day after day after day after day. It would be like feeding your small dog 40 cloves of garlic a day. Nobody would do that. So normal amounts of garlic, and we have doses on the website, are actually very effective, but it needs to be fresh. In our herbal formulations, we might use things like lavender or yarrow or neem. And so those are powders that we can add to the food. Then my dogs all wear a scalar wave tag, which syncs with their heart and repels fleas and ticks. It works really well, and the company actually guarantees it, but you can never take it off. So if you take the collar off for grooming, or you take the collar off at bedtime, or if they're crated, then it doesn't work. Has to stay on them. We have ultrasonic collars as well. And then I use essential oil sprays that are made specifically for fleas and ticks. And there are different flavors. So we have one that's a lavender base. We have another one that's a neem base. We have another one that's a lemongrass base. And it's really interesting with the fleas. In some areas of the country, the lemongrass will work better. In other areas, lavender will work better. So if you're using one, and you specifically want to get one that's been tested and made for pets, because essential oils can be toxic used incorrectly. So my animals are going to get multiple layers. They're getting fed something, they have a tag on, and then if we're going in an area where they're going to be exposed, then I'm also spraying them. And when I bring them home from those areas, I'm going through them with a very fine comb and checking them over really well. I have 7 barn cats, so they live out on the farm and they go down in the woods a lot. They're raw fed, they're minimally vaccinated, so they're very, very healthy. And if I find 1 or 2 this year so far, of 7 cats, I've found 2 ticks. And the healthier the animal, the less likely they are to be parasitized. Parasites parasitize the weak. So you want to keep that immune system healthy. So that's where that species appropriate diet, not over vaccinating, not using a bunch of medications and chemicals on them. Anything you can do to strengthen their immune system is going to be helpful. The other thing with most of the chemical flea and tick products, they don't repel fleas and ticks. The fleas and ticks have to bite your animal in order to die.
Yeah.
So we're not preventing transmission of tick-borne diseases if the tick has to attach, take a blood meal, and then it dies. So I'd much rather use things that is going to make my animals not attractive to the fleas and ticks.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like that. I've got a question for you that's specific to my dog because I live in
Sure.
Florida. We take the dog to the beach a lot. She's in the water all the time. We've got a pool. I mean, if we let her out in the pool area, I mean, she'll go swimming on her own. She don't care. She's like, oh,
Awesome.
pool, I'll swim. She loves it. What's the best thing to do to protect her ears? Because
So witch hazel actually is great.
like
So
drops.
yeah, if you look at so you want to use it after she swims. When she comes out,
Yeah,
you don't want moisture left in the ear.
yeah.
So if you look at like the swimmer's ear drops for kids, it's just a
Hmm.
drying solution. A lot of times it's alcohol because alcohol is very drying.
Yeah. But we
So
heard it's not good to use alcohol in the dog's ears.
it's really not, because if there
Okay.
is any ulceration or anything, it burns.
Oh,
So witch hazel is great. So a few drops after she comes out from swimming, let her shake really well, and then a couple drops of witch hazel is going to dry any moisture that's in there. Works really, really well. A lot of the holistic cleaners on the market use witch hazel as the base because it is drying, it's soothing, it doesn't burn at all, and the animals don't mind it.
excellent. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Another specific question I have is to breeds. Our last dog was a golden doodle. We have a labradoodle now, and they get these bumps under their skin. The first dog we didn't have, I mean, she was, she lived to 15 and a half years old, so she got
Awesome.
quite a bit of them, but we didn't get her on a raw food diet early. We didn't know about it. Our labradoodle, she's been on a raw food diet for a few years now, so getting to be about half her life. But she still has one, fairly
One's not
large.
bad. Yeah, so we see lipomas. That's probably what you're describing if it's kind of under the skin, but you
Yeah.
cut them and you kind of go up over the lump.
Yep.
Most of those are benign lipomas, but the lipomas form from toxins that are in the body. That's the body saying, let me just wall this thing off. But they can get huge. We had one dog that had one that was almost 40 pounds. And so they can be dissolved. I actually have podcast that's a couple of years old done with Rita Hogan, who's an herbalist. And the
Okay.
podcast was on how to dissolve lipomas. And so she gave sort of an herbal protocol for it. I don't have issues with lipomas in my dogs now, but when I had kibble fed dogs, and I used to have Dobermans used to be my breed, so very large dogs.
Mhm.
And one of my Dobermans, before I got into raw feeding, my kids and I sat there and counted 80 lipomas on that dog before we gave up counting. And he
Wow.
was just like lumps on lumps on lumps. Now, it was before I was into holistic medicine, so he was being fed horrible dry kibble. He was being vaccinated every single year with everything available. Uh, and so I look at that and I would see the same thing in practice. You know, you can, and large breed dogs are much more prone to making lipomas than small breed dogs. Don't know why. People can make them too, but they're really just areas that the body is walling off toxins. And so acupuncture can help dissolve them, herbs can help dissolve them. A lot of times, if we take a dog who's kibble fed and then we switch their diet and we put, I don't know if you're into traditional Chinese medicine at all, but
Yeah.
we
I actually
use,
see a
okay,
friend who's an
so we
acupuncturist
use,
who
okay, great.
uses,
So
yeah.
we use food therapy, and there are foods that are used to dissolve phlegm. And lipomas are basically just big balls of phlegm.
Mm.
The other phlegm that we get in our body is snot. So, when you have that congestion in your chest or your head, we use foods to drain phlegm. And so in my books and on the website, there are lists of foods. You can find it frankly on the internet very easily. Just look up traditional Chinese medicine food therapy phlegm drainers. But clams and pears are very good. Most of our dogs, peppermint's very good. So you could just get fresh or canned clams, rinse the salt off of them, add them to your dog's diet. That will help dissolve it. Pears, either fresh or canned in water, add those. And most of the dogs are like, oh, this is good stuff. I like this. It's a nice treat. Um, and a little fresh ground peppermint in the food. But there's a lot of things that we can do using food to help fix problems like that.
Okay, great. Definitely gonna check that out. So we covered raw food diet, vaccines, a little bit more, I think supplements. Um, what would you recommend next for people that really love their dog and want the best for them?
So if they're eating a kibble diet, we want to get them on a fresh food diet.
Yeah.
And so that might start with adding to the kibble. Fresh berries are great, full of antioxidants. They're, just superfoods for them, just like they are for us. I love mushrooms. Mushrooms are, they're going to release all their beta glucans if they're gently cooked or sauteed. So cook them in coconut oil or olive oil. The same with dark leafy greens are great for our dogs. Eggs, sardines. Those are things that a pumpkin is also very good. So even organic canned pumpkin, dogs love it. Cats do too. So you can start adding things, fresh things to the bowl. Then you might want to check out local independent pet stores. And if you walk in and they have a bunch of refrigerators and freezers full of food, you're probably in the right place. And the people that own those independent pet stores really do a good job educating themselves and then educating their clients as to getting pets onto fresh foods. It could be raw, it could be gently cooked. I mean, no dog in the wild is cooking their food, but that's okay. We're all told to be scared of raw food by our veterinarians, by the CDC, by AVMA, and AHA. It's not going to kill them. It's fine. So I've been feeding raw food for 25 years, been prescribing raw food for my patients for at least that long, and never had any issues with it. But um, a lot of people are still very nervous about it. And there are a lot of really good pet food companies now, the smaller companies that are coming out with gently cooked foods, fresh foods, and you're going to find them in freezer or refrigerated section of the pet stores. You could also find for people who are like, I don't have room in my freezer. I can't store that kind of food. You can get freeze dried freeze-dried or dehydrated food, and then you just add warm water or bone broth. For those who are raw feeders or are buying frozen foods or refrigerated foods, you want to warm it up to room temperature. If we think about the prey, a cat catches a mouse, they eat it right away. So it's still at body temperature. It's still 101 degrees. And we don't want to feed cold food to our pets. It's very, very bad for the digestive system. Really bad. Same with us. We shouldn't have ice in our drinks. Right. We're not supposed to drink cold things. It's very, very bad for digestion. So, and for our pets, especially for cats, like they have to be able to smell their food. It has to be enticing to them. And so when we warm up the food or serve it at a warmer temperature, it has more smell. It releases more odors, and then it's more pleasing to them. But it's really, we want it warmed up for digestive purposes. And then supplements for no matter what diet you're feeding. I'm a huge fan of omega-3s. So marine oil, which could be fish, squid, calamari, whitefish, salmon oils. Really, really important for brain health, joint health, gut health, heart health, particularly if you have a breed that is prone to any of those problems. It's really good to supplement that. You want to make sure that you're not buying it in plastic bottles. Don't store it where it's hot. So the refrigerator is a great place to store those. I do, especially for the large breed dogs, I really like some sort of joint support. The omega-3s are part of that, but we use elk velvet antler, which is a natural source of glucosamine, chondroitin, hyaluronic acid. We use a product called PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide. It's a natural substance that's made by the body, but we don't make as much of it as we age. It's used in human functional medicine a lot, and we're using it for the pets as well, but really good for any kind of inflammatory condition in the body, just really supportive. We also love raw dairy for our pets. Raw goat milk is easy to find. We don't want it pasteurized. We do want it raw or fermented, and that is available. You can order it online, comes frozen. You can get it at these pet stores, independent pet stores. Really, really good for gut health and immune support.
Excellent. So beyond food and not over vaccinating, what would be the third thing you recommend for pet owners to improve
No
their
chemicals. No chemicals. Get away from the chemicals and the over medicating. If you have a pet with chronic inflammatory problems, medicine is made to stop the symptoms. It's not made to cure things.
Right.
So when we have these pets with allergies, they end up getting put on immune suppressant drugs. They are on chronic antibiotics for skin infections. They're on monoclonal antibody injections to stop the itching. None of that is curing the allergies, curing the problem, curing the inflammatory bowel disease, curing the arthritis. Yeah. All that's doing is stopping symptoms. When we put them on a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory because they're limping, yeah, we're making them feel better. We're getting rid of a symptom, but we're not changing the status of the joints.
Not going after the root cause.
Exactly. So, when we look at holistic medicine, it's what can I do? What can I use that is going to help them regenerate and restore that health, not what do I keep giving to suppress, and destroy? And, even with our cancer cases, unfortunately, in holistic medicine, a lot of times we're the last stop. People have gone to 4 different veterinarians already. They've been to all the specialists, and their pet's been on years of chronic medication, and they're not getting any better because the medications stop working after a while. Then they land in the holistic vet office, and I'm sure the same thing happens in the holistic human fields as well.
Yeah.
And so the whole goal is, what do I have to do to get them off these medications? You can't stop them cold turkey. What do I have to do to get them off, and how do I restore the body to healing itself, restore it to function, so that it can do what God designed it to do? I need a healthy immune system, which means I need a healthy gut. We're doing a lot with microbiome transplants, fecal transplants. They're easy to do now. We have it in capsule form. You just give a capsule once a day for 30 days. Look at that. We've got a fecal transplant. It's so easy to do. And so for a lot of these animals
What are
that
these transplants you're talking about?
it's basically they're taking stool feces from extremely healthy dogs. So the company that we use, the stool comes from a line of dogs that 7 generations with no vaccines, no medications, raw fed dogs.
Wow.
And so, yes, when you have that as your baseline, you've got incredible microbiome. So,
Okay.
trillions of bacteria, fungal species. And it really interesting that I took a microbiome stool sample on one of my healthy dog and never has GI problems or anything. And I thought, well, this is going to come back perfect. It came back looking really, really good, but in there she had some antibiotic resistant bacteria. And I'm like, wow, this dog hasn't been on antibiotics in like 8 years. Like, wow, where's that coming from? And so, but she seemed fine and healthy, and her stool looked good, her appetite's good, everything's fine. But that piece of paper with that test told me, there's some not good guys in here. And so I said, all right, I'm just going to give her these capsules, these fecal transplant capsules in her food for 30 days, one a day for 30 days. Retested, and her fungal element diversity was much, much better when it came back, and all of those antibiotic resistant bacteria were gone. And now
Amazing.
we had a very healthy microbiome. And so when you have an animal with chronic inflammatory disease, we've got to get rid of that inflammation. And in order to do that, we've got to have a healthy microbiome. So most dogs with skin conditions, the veterinarian's going to send home a bottle of veterinary shampoo. It's going to have antibiotics in it. It's going to have antifungals in it. It might have steroids in it. It might have numbing agents in it. All we've done is destroyed the microbiome of the skin. Now we don't have any good guys anymore. Okay, we're just going to keep getting infection after infection because the bad guys get to take over. And so when we look for shampoos, we look for things without the chemicals in them. We look for essential oils. We look for things. We actually have shampoos with probiotics in them, the good guys in there. It's like, I want to replace them. Here's how I replace them. The same with the ear infections that we have with dogs. Almost all veterinary ear medications have an antibiotic, a steroid, and an antifungal in them. It's the trifecta. And so you don't even have to know what kind of infection there is in the ear because you're going to treat everything anyway. But now we've destroyed the microbiome in the ear. How do we get that back? So that's why we look at things a little bit differently.
Fascinating. I love that. I mean, such good information. There's a lot packed into this episode. It's like one of those episodes you got to listen to a few times to get everything out of it. So check on that. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience before we wrap up here?
I think that's pretty good. We are offering your audience 50% off any of my books. I've written 9. I'm working on number 10.
Nice.
If they use the code YOGI50 on drjudymorgan.com, which is also naturallyhealthypets.com, check out my books. There's a ton of information in there. A lot of the stuff that we've covered is covered in more depth.
I love that. Thank you so much for offering our audience
Sure.
the discount. That's
No
beautiful.
problem.
And thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
And
very much.